He thought he was finally winning, standing on the steps of their beautiful home as her car pulled away. He had the promotion in his sights, the exciting new woman by his side, and the house, his kingdom, all to himself. But victory built on a lie is just a beautiful trap, waiting to spring shut. The sound of the engine fading down the street was the sweetest music Leo had ever heard. He stood on the porch, a triumphant smile on his face, his arm wrapped tightly around Sloane's waist. The evening air was cool, but he felt a warmth spreading through his chest, a feeling he mistook for freedom. He looked at the impressive two-story house, with its manicured lawn and large bay windows. His house. He had worked so hard for this, for everything. He deserved a partner who understood the ambition it took, not one who was content to splash paint on canvases in the spare room. "She's finally gone," Sloane purred, her fingers tracing the lapel of his expensive suit. "Now we can finally begin our lives, my love. No more hiding." Leo squeezed her, pulling her closer. "No more hiding," he repeated, the words feeling like a promise of a golden future. He looked at Sloane, with her sharp, stylish haircut, her perfectly tailored dress, and her hunger for success that matched his own. She was a woman who belonged in his world, the world of Apex Realty, where deals were closed in boardrooms and success was measured in commission checks. Ilara was different. She was quiet, gentle. She saw beauty in sunsets and old books. For years, he had loved that about her. It was a comfort, a soft place to land after a brutal day in the cutthroat world of real estate. But lately, her softness had started to feel like a weakness. While he was networking until midnight, she was gardening. While he was studying market trends, she was painting what she called emotional landscapes. He had started to see her not as his anchor, but as his dead weight. "What are you thinking about?" Sloane asked, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. "Just how right this feels," he said, kissing her forehead. "Let's go inside. Let's celebrate our new beginning." They walked into the house, and the first thing Sloane did was wrinkle her nose. "Ugh, this whole place smells like her. Turpentine and lavender." She shuddered dramatically. "We need to change everything. I'm thinking modern. Clean lines. Gray, white, and chrome. A house for a king." Leo's chest puffed out. "A house for a king," he echoed. "I like that." He didn't notice the small framed photo of Ilara's parents on the mantelpiece, her father's kind eyes seeming to watch him with disappointment. He didn't see the hand-painted tile she had placed by the hearth, a small bluebird hidden in the design. He saw only a space to be conquered and remade, just as he believed he was remaking his life. Meanwhile, Ilara drove with no destination in mind. The tears she had refused to shed in front of him now streamed freely down her face, blurring the streetlights into long, watery streaks. His words echoed in her ears, each one a sharp shard of glass in her heart. "It's over, Ilara. I can't do this anymore. I need someone who is on my level. Someone who gets it. You're a sweet woman, but you're stuck in a dream world. I'm a doer. I'm going places. I've met someone. Sloane. From the office. She understands me. This is my house. I paid for it with my blood, sweat, and tears. You can take your paints and your clothes, but I need you gone by tonight." His house. The lie was so bitter, it almost made her laugh. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. The house wasn't his. It had never been his. It was hers, a wedding gift from her father, the late, great founder of Sterling Properties, which had rebranded as Apex Realty after his passing. The company Leo was so desperate to conquer was, in fact, hers. All of it. Her father, a wise and cautious man, had made her promise one thing before he died. "Ellie," he'd said, his voice weak but firm. "This fortune, it can be a blessing or a curse. Don't let a man fall in love with your bank account. Let him fall in love with you. Live simply. Let him build a life with you, not on top of you. When you find the one who loves you for your heart, who respects your spirit without knowing a thing about your wallet, then you can tell him. She thought Leo was that man. For 8 years, she truly believed it. She had lived modestly, taking on a small job as a freelance graphic designer to contribute, but mostly focusing on her art. She played the part of the supportive, simple wife perfectly. She watched him struggle at Apex Realty, offering quiet encouragement. She'd even used her anonymous position as majority shareholder to subtly guide opportunities his way, believing she was helping her husband build his confidence. She'd suggest he look into a certain neighborhood, knowing the company was about to invest there. She'd mention a new commercial development, knowing a major client was about to sign. He thought it was his own brilliant intuition. He called it his gut feeling. He had no idea his gut was being fed by the woman he just called a dreamer. The woman he just kicked out of her own home. She finally pulled over, her car idling on a quiet, tree-lined street. She looked at her reflection in the rear-view mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. The woman staring back at her looked defeated. But beneath the heartbreak, a tiny hard ember of anger was beginning to glow. He hadn't just betrayed her love. He had betrayed her father's legacy. He had proven himself to be the very man her father had warned her about. She took a deep, shuddering breath and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her contacts, past friends and family, until she found a name she hadn't called in years. Arthur Vance, her father's lawyer and the acting chairman of the board at Apex Realty. Her finger hovered over the call button. For 8 years, she had been Alara, the gentle artist, the supportive wife. Now, it was time to remember who she really was. She was Lawris Sterling. And it was time to go back to work. The first week was a blur of champagne and smug satisfaction for Leo. He and Sloane moved through the house like conquerors, tearing down Alara's gentle world and replacing it with their own cold, modern vision. The warm, cream-colored walls were painted a sterile gallery white. Alara's handmade pottery was boxed up and shoved into the garage, replaced by sharp, geometric sculptures. Her beloved garden, once a riot of wildflowers and fragrant herbs, was scheduled to be paved over for an expanded patio and outdoor kitchen. "This is more like it," Sloane said one evening, swirling a glass of expensive wine. They were standing in the living room, now furnished with a low-profile leather sofa and a glass coffee table. A power couple needs a powerhouse. Leo nodded, but a strange hollow feeling echoed in his chest. The house was starting to feel less like a home and more like a showroom. It was beautiful, impressive, but it had no soul. He remembered how Alara would hum while she cooked, the scent of her baking filling every room. He remembered finding her asleep on the old, comfortable couch, a book resting on her chest. Those memories felt like they belonged to another man, in another lifetime. He pushed them away. This was progress. This was what he wanted. At work, Leo was walking on air. Having Sloane, a top agent, openly on his arm gave him a new level of credibility. They were the office's new power couple. People who used to ignore him were now stopping by his desk to chat. He felt invincible. He was closing in on the Evergreen Terrace project, a massive residential development that would make him a legend at the company. His commission would be astronomical. It was the deal he'd been chasing for a year. "The final papers are being drawn up," he told Sloane over a celebratory lunch. "The board just needs to give the final sign-off. It's a formality. This deal is mine." "Our deal," Sloane corrected gently, placing her hand on his. "Think of what we can do with that money. A trip to Monaco? A new car for you? A little something shiny for me." She winked. He smiled, but the word "our" felt different coming from her. With Alara, our meant a shared life, a team. With Sloane, it felt transactional. Still, he ignored the feeling. This was the price of admission to the top. Meanwhile, Alara wasn't just healing, she was transforming. She had moved into her father's old city penthouse, a place she hadn't set foot in since he died. It was a stark, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. It felt like a command center. For the first few days, she did nothing but sit in the silence, letting the grief wash over her. She allowed herself to feel the full, crushing weight of the betrayal. She wept for the man she thought she had married and for the fool she had been. Then, she got to work. She met with Arthur Vance, a kind, white-haired man who had been her father's closest friend. He looked at her with deep sympathy. "I am so sorry, Elara," he said, his voice heavy. "Your father, he would be heartbroken. And furious." "He would be," she agreed, her own voice surprisingly steady. "He would also tell me to stop crying and fix it. Leo thinks he's on top of the world. He's about to close the Evergreen Terrace deal." Arthur nodded. "Yes. It's a major project. He's been very aggressive on it. He has no idea that I was the one who greenlit the initial exploration phase, does he?" Elara asked, a cold irony in her tone. "I flagged that area as a high-growth corridor 2 years ago. I steered the company's resources toward it, hoping he would see the opportunity and seize it. I wanted him to succeed." "He believes it was his own discovery," Arthur confirmed. "He's been quite proud of it." A shadow crossed Elara's face. Pride. That's all he has left. "Arthur, I want to call a full mandatory all-hands meeting for every employee at Apex Realty. In 2 weeks. And I want to put a temporary hold on the final approval of the Evergreen Terrace project until after that meeting." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "A hold? That will make him very anxious." "Good," Elara said, her voice like ice. "Let him be anxious. Let him feel like the ground is shifting under his feet. He took my home, my trust, and my heart. He's about to find out what it really costs to build an empire on someone else's foundation." Over the next 2 weeks, Elara underwent a metamorphosis. She traded her paint-splattered jeans for custom-tailored suits. She spent hours with Arthur and the other board members, poring over every report, every projection, every employee file. She wasn't just the owner, she was becoming the leader. The quiet artist receded, and the sharp, intelligent mind of Lawris Stories, her father's daughter, came roaring to the front. She was calm, decisive, and radiated an authority that surprised even herself. Back at the office, Leo was starting to panic. The email about the hold on Evergreen Terrace had sent a shockwave through his world. "What does this mean, pending an internal review?" he demanded, storming over to Sloane's desk. "The deal is done. It's a sure thing." Sloane looked up from her computer, her expression annoyed. "Calm down, Leo. You're making a scene. It's probably just some corporate red tape. The new ownership is probably just flexing its muscles." "New ownership? What new ownership?" Leo asked, confused. The company had been run by the board since Mr. Stories died. Sloane rolled her eyes. "Honestly, do you read your emails? There's been chatter for weeks. Stories' heir, who has been a silent partner until now, is taking an active role. There's a mandatory meeting in 2 weeks to introduce them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have calls to make. This panic of yours is not a good look." She turned back to her screen, dismissing him. Leo stood there, feeling a cold dread creep up his spine. The confidence he'd felt just days before was evaporating. He felt a sudden, sharp longing for Elara. She would have listened. She would have sat with him, talked it through, and made him feel like he could handle anything. Sloane just seemed irritated that his problems were inconveniencing her. That night, he couldn't sleep. The big, empty house felt cold and unwelcoming. He found himself wandering into the garage, where the boxes of Elara's things were stacked. He opened one and saw her collection of old vinyl records, her worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, and a small framed painting of a lighthouse standing strong against a stormy sea. He had always teased her about that painting, calling it cliché. Looking at it now, he felt a lump form in his throat. The lighthouse wasn't giving up. It was just standing there, taking the waves, waiting for the sun to rise. The 2 weeks leading up to the all-hands meeting were the longest of Leo's life. His anxiety was a constant, gnawing presence. The Evergreen Terrace deal, his masterpiece, was frozen in limbo. His attempts to get information were met with polite but firm stonewalls from upper management. "All will be clarified at the meeting, Mr. Vance," was the only answer he got. The power he thought he had was an illusion, and the reality of his powerlessness was terrifying. His relationship with Sloane began to crack under the pressure. The fun, flirty woman who had worshipped his ambition was replaced by a demanding, irritable partner. "Did you hear anything yet?" she would ask every day, the moment he walked in the door. It wasn't a question of concern, it was an accusation. "No, I told you, they're not telling anyone anything," he'd snap back, his nerves frayed. "Well, you need to make them tell you," she said one night, throwing her napkin onto the dinner table. "You told me you were a major player here, Leo. A rainmaker. But right now, you just seem like a scared little boy. I didn't leave my career prospects on the table to be with a scared little boy." The words hit him like a slap. Elara had never spoken to him like that. Even when he was at his lowest, when he'd lost a big client or a deal fell through, she had been his rock. She would make him tea, listen to him vent, and tell him she believed in him. Sloane only seemed to believe in the successful version of him. The moment that version faltered, her support vanished. He started thinking about Elara more and more. He missed her quiet presence. He missed the way she'd smile when he walked in the door. He missed the feeling of being unconditionally loved, a feeling he had thrown away for, what? A colder, more beautiful house? A partner who saw him as a stock to be invested in? The regret was a physical ache in his chest. He tried calling her once, late at night, his hand trembling as he dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. He hung up without leaving a message. What could he possibly say? Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. The main conference hall at Apex Realty was packed. Every employee, from the mailroom clerks to the senior vice presidents, was there. The air was thick with anticipation and nervous chatter. Leo and Sloane found seats near the middle. Sloane was wearing a striking red dress, ready to impress the new boss. Leo just felt sick. Arthur Vance, the aging chairman of the board, walked to the podium. The room fell silent. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice calm and authoritative. "Thank you all for being here. As you know, for the past 8 years, since the passing of our founder, the brilliant David Sterling, this company has been managed by the board of directors, acting in the interests of the majority shareholder. That shareholder has, until now, chosen to remain anonymous, allowing the company's excellent leadership team to guide us." He paused, letting his words sink in. "However, circumstances have changed. The time has come for a new era of leadership at Apex Realty. The heir to the Sterling fortune has decided to take their rightful place at the head of this company. It is my great honor to introduce you to the new majority owner and CEO of Apex Realty." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Leo leaned forward, his heart pounding. Who was it? Some distant cousin? A long-lost nephew? He prayed it was someone reasonable, someone who would see the genius of his Evergreen Terrace project and sign off on it immediately. "Please welcome," Arthur said, his voice ringing with pride, "Ms. Lawris Sterling." The name hit Leo like a physical blow. Elara? Sterling? It didn't make sense. It was a mistake. A joke. His Elara was a painter. She wore jeans and old sweaters. She didn't know the first thing about corporate finance or real estate. Then, the large doors at the back of the hall swung open, and she walked in. It was Elara, but it was not the Elara he knew. The woman who entered the room was not the soft, gentle wife he had discarded. This woman was a queen. She wore a sharp, dark blue power suit that fit her perfectly. Her hair, which she used to wear in a simple, loose ponytail, was styled in an elegant, professional updo. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable, but her eyes held a fire he had never seen before. She walked with a confidence that commanded the attention of the entire room. A collective gasp went through the hall. People were whispering, pointing. Leo felt the blood drain from his face. He felt Sloane stiffen beside him, her manicured hand flying to her mouth. "No," Sloane whispered, her voice trembling. "It can't be." But it was. Elara walked straight to the stage, shook Arthur Vance's hand, and turned to face the crowd. She stood at the podium, her eyes scanning the sea of faces until they landed directly on Leo. For a single, heart-stopping moment, their eyes met. He saw no love there. No hate. Just a cold, clear recognition, as if she were looking at a complete stranger who had wronged her long ago. The room was so quiet, Leo could hear the frantic thumping of his own heart. He felt hundreds of pairs of eyes turning to look at him, the man who had been parading his affair around the office for weeks. The man who had been living in the new CEO's house with his mistress. The humiliation was a hot, suffocating wave. Elara cleared her throat, and the sound echoed through the silent room. "Good morning," she said, her voice smooth and strong, with none of the gentle hesitation he was used to. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lawris Sterling. My father, David Sterling, built this company from the ground up on a foundation of integrity, loyalty, and a commitment to building communities, not just houses. For the past 8 years, I have been a silent observer. But I am silent no longer. Today marks a new beginning for Apex Realty. A day where we return to the core values my father held so dear." Every word was a nail in Leo's coffin. Integrity. Loyalty. He had failed on every count. He had not just betrayed his wife, he had betrayed the very principles of the company he worked for, and he had done it to the founder's own daughter. He looked at Sloane, whose face was a mask of pure, horrified shock. Her dream of latching onto a king had just exploded in her face. She was staring at Elara, then at Leo, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning fury. He had kicked his wife out of her own home to move his mistress in, completely unaware that he had just declared war on the most powerful person in his entire world. Have you ever given your all to someone, only to be told you weren't enough? How do you find the strength to redefine your worth on your own terms after a betrayal like that? The silence that followed Elara's introduction was heavier than any noise. It was a silence filled with judgment, with shock, and with the dawning delicious thrill of office gossip. Leo felt like an insect pinned to a board, squirming under the collective gaze of his colleagues. He could feel their stares burning into him. They weren't just looking at him. They were re-evaluating every conversation they'd ever had with him, every boast he'd ever made, every confident stride he had taken through the office with Sloane on his arm. It was all a lie. He wasn't a king. He was a court jester who had mistaken the queen for a commoner. Elara's speech continued, but Leo barely heard the words. He was trapped in a nightmare. He saw her pointing to charts and graphs, talking about new strategic initiatives and a renewed focus on corporate ethics. Every word, though directed at the entire company, felt like a personal indictment of him. Finally, she concluded, "I look forward to working with all of you to build a stronger, more honorable Apex Realty. Thank you." The room erupted in applause, a mixture of genuine enthusiasm and nervous sycophancy. As Elara stepped away from the podium, her eyes swept over the crowd one last time, deliberately avoiding him. The cut was so clean, so absolute, it was more painful than any screaming match could have been. The meeting broke, and the hall instantly filled with a roar of conversation. Leo was frozen in his seat. Sloane, however, was not. She shot up from her chair, her face pale with rage. "You idiot!" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You complete and utter fool. Her? Your mousy little wife was Lawris Sterling." "I didn't know," Leo stammered, his own voice sounding foreign to him. "You didn't know," she scoffed, her laugh sharp and cruel. "You lived with her for 8 years. What, did you think the beautiful house you were so proud of just fell out of the sky? You told me you bought it. You lied to me. I thought I did. The payments came from our joint account. I just assumed my commissions were covering it, he said, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. He realized now that Alara must have been depositing money into the account all along, carefully maintaining the illusion of their simple life. The depth of her long-term deception, done to protect herself, was staggering. But it was his more recent, more brutal betrayal that had brought it all crashing down. So you're not just a cheater, you're an idiot, Sloane spat, her eyes darting around nervously as people began to stare at them. I hitched my wagon to a moron. My career in this company is over. Do you realize what you've done? She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed her purse, gave him one last look of pure disgust, and stormed away, pushing through the crowd as if fleeing a contaminated zone. Left alone, Leo finally found the strength to stand. He felt dizzy, disoriented. He stumbled out of the conference hall and into the main office area. The atmosphere had completely changed. The people who had been avoiding his gaze were now staring openly, whispering behind their hands as he passed. He saw smirks, looks of pity, and looks of pure contempt. He had been the confident, rising star. Now he was a joke. The man who kicked the owner of the company out of her own house. He made it to his desk, which felt like a foreign country. On his monitor was the proposal for the Evergreen Terrace project, the document that was supposed to be his crowning achievement. It now looked like a monument to his own stupidity. He had stolen her ideas, presented them as his own, and planned to use the profits to build a new life on the ruins of the one she had so carefully and lovingly built for him. He sank into his chair, dropping his head into his hands. The humiliation was crushing, but underneath it, a deeper, more painful emotion was surfacing, profound, soul-crushing regret. He thought of Alara. Not the powerful CEO on the stage, but his Alara. The one who would bring him coffee in the morning, who would listen to him complain about his boss, who would celebrate his smallest victories as if they were her own. He had called her a dreamer, someone holding him back. But she hadn't been holding him back. She had been holding him up. She had been the invisible architect of his entire career, and he had been too blind and too arrogant to see it. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was an email. The subject line was stark, mandatory HR meeting. His heart sank even further. This was it. The end. He walked to the HR office on the top floor like a man walking to the gallows. He was met not by the usual HR manager, but by Arthur Vance himself. Arthur's expression was not angry. It was worse. It was disappointed. He motioned for Leo to sit. "Leo," he began, his voice tired. "I've known Alara since she was a little girl. I watched her father build this company. I also watched her fall in love with you. She truly believed you were a good man." Leo couldn't speak. He could only stare at the floor, the shame burning his cheeks. "She put her entire inheritance, her very identity, on hold for you," Arthur continued. "All she asked for in return was your love and your loyalty. When she came to me 2 weeks ago, I had never seen her so broken. But I have also never seen her so strong. She is her father's daughter, through and through." Arthur slid a folder across the desk. "This is your new employment contract." Leo blinked, confused. "New contract? I'm not fired." "No," Arthur said, a grim set to his mouth. "Firing you would be too easy. That's not what Alara wants. She believes in consequences, not simple revenge. She believes people should have to live with the choices they make." He opened the folder. "Your title of Senior Project Manager is being revoked. Your salary and commission structure are being reset. You're being reassigned." Leo's blood ran cold. "Reassigned? To where?" "To where you started," Arthur said, his eyes hard as stone. "You'll be working in the archives, managing entry-level property filing. It's a junior associate position. You will report to Ms. Albright." She just started here 6 months ago. I believe you trained her. The humiliation was absolute. It was a professional death sentence. He would be a ghost in the machine, a walking reminder of what not to do, stripped of all status and power, forced to work in the basement, taking orders from a kid he had trained. Arthur slid a second document across the desk. It was an official eviction notice. This, Arthur said, his voice devoid of any sympathy, is a legal notice to vacate the property at 125 Oakwood Lane within 30 days. As you now know, that property is owned by a private trust under Ms. Sterling's name. Considering the circumstances, I think you'll find it's a very generous timeline. Leo stared at the paper. The address of the home he had so proudly claimed as his kingdom. The home he had kicked her out of. It was all gone. Everything he thought he had won, he had lost. And the woman he had thrown away was the one taking it all back. The first day in his new role was a masterclass in humiliation. Leo, who had once strode through the gleaming halls of Apex Realty with the confidence of a conquering hero, now had to take the service elevator down to the basement. The archives were a stark contrast to the open-plan, sunlit offices above. It was a cold, windowless space filled with rows of gray filing cabinets, the air thick with the smell of old paper and dust. His new desk was a small metal table crammed into a corner, right next to a humming, rattling photocopier. His new boss, Jessica Albright, a bright-eyed young woman barely out of college, could hardly look him in the eye. He had been her mentor just a month ago, condescendingly showing her the ropes. Now, she was his superior. Leo, she began, her voice trembling slightly. So, we just need you to start with these boxes. They're files from the 2010 to 2012 commercial leases. They need to be digitized, cataloged, and then refiled. The scanner instructions are on the scanner. She scurried away, clearly mortified. Leo was left alone with a mountain of dusty cardboard boxes. This was his life now. The man who had been orchestrating multi-million-dollar deals was now a glorified clerk. Every time someone from the upper floors came down to retrieve a file, they would do a double-take upon seeing him. Some would offer a tight, pitying smile. Others would just stare, their eyes full of a kind of morbid curiosity, before quickly looking away. He was a cautionary tale, a ghost haunting the foundations of the company. The eviction notice sat on his passenger seat every day on his drive to and from the house that was no longer his. Living there for the next 30 days was its own special kind of torture. Every room was a monument to his failure. The new, cold furniture Sloane had picked out felt accusatory. The empty spaces on the walls where Alara's art used to hang felt like gaping wounds. Sloane was long gone. After their confrontation at the meeting, she had cleaned out her things from the house while he was at work, leaving only an angry, scrawled note on the kitchen counter. It called him a fool and a liar, and demanded he never contact her again. He had heard through the office grapevine that she had been fired the day after the meeting. Her position was eliminated for failing to align with the company's core values of integrity. It was a direct, public consequence of her association with him. He had not only ruined his own life, but he had also torched hers. He felt a flicker of guilt, but it was quickly consumed by his own overwhelming misery. He was utterly alone. The friends he had, mostly work colleagues impressed by his success, had evaporated. No one wanted to be associated with him. He would come home to the huge, silent house, the silence broken only by the echo of his own footsteps. He ate frozen dinners standing over the sink. He'd wander from room to room, haunted by the ghost of the life he had destroyed. One night, unable to bear the oppressive silence, he went into the garage. He saw the boxes of Alara's belongings, the ones he had so carelessly told her to take. He knelt and opened one. Inside was a scrapbook she had made for their 5th anniversary. The first page had a photo of them on their wedding day. He looked so young, so happy. Alara was beaming, her eyes filled with a love so pure and unconditional it made his chest ache. He slowly turned the pages. There were photos of them setting up their first tiny apartment. A picture of him after he got his job at Apex, Elara holding a small lopsided congratulations cake she had baked. There were ticket stubs from movies, pressed flowers from a hike they took, and handwritten notes she had left for him over the years. "Good luck on your presentation. I'm so proud of you," one read. Another, tucked beside a photo of him looking exhausted after a long week, said, "Don't forget to rest. You're more than just your job. I love you." He had forgotten that man, the one she loved. That man was happy with simple things. That man's ambition hadn't yet curdled into arrogance. When had he changed? When had he started to believe that her love was not enough? That her gentle world was a cage, instead of a sanctuary? He slammed the scrapbook shut, a guttural sob escaping his throat. The sound was raw, animalistic. It was the sound of a man breaking. He finally saw it all with horrifying clarity. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost the best part of himself. He had traded gold for glitter, and now he was left with nothing but dust in his hands. The breaking point came a week before he was due to move out. He was at work, mindlessly scanning a decades-old property deed, when a familiar scent wafted down the basement stairwell. Lavender. Elara's scent. His head snapped up. He heard voices from the main floor. He crept to the bottom of the stairs and listened. It was Elara. She was giving a tour to a group of investors. Her voice was confident, knowledgeable, and passionate. "And our foundational principle, which we are reinvesting in, is community," she was saying. "We don't just build structures, we build homes. We build neighborhoods where families can grow, where people feel safe and connected. That was my father's vision, and it is now mine." Leo sank onto the cold concrete steps, hidden from view. He listened to her speak about market analytics and growth projections with an expertise that stunned him. This wasn't an act. This was who she was. The intelligent, capable woman was always there, right beside him. He had just refused to see her. He had put her in a box, labeled her the artist, the dreamer, and never bothered to look inside. The tour moved on. The scent of lavender faded. Leo sat there on the stairs for a long time, the humming of the basement machinery his only companion. The full weight of his colossal mistake finally crushed him. It wasn't just about the money or the company. He had been married to a brilliant, powerful, and loving woman who had offered him the world, and he had thrown her out because he was too insecure to see her as his equal. He stood up, a new, terrible resolve hardening in his gut. He couldn't undo what he had done. He couldn't get her back. But he couldn't live like this either, a ghost in his own life, haunted by regret. He had to face her. Not to ask for forgiveness, he didn't deserve it, but to tell her the truth. To admit everything. It was the only thing left to do. The 30 days were up. Leo packed the last of his belongings into cardboard boxes, a pathetic parody of the day Elara had done the same. The house was now an empty, echoing shell. The expensive furniture Sloane had chosen was gone, sold for a fraction of its price to a consignment shop. All that remained were the ghosts of 2 different lives he had systematically destroyed. He was moving into a small one-bedroom apartment across town, in a dreary building with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall. It was all he could afford now. As he was taping up the final box, he found something tucked away in the back of the closet. It was one of Elara's paintings, one he didn't even know she had kept. It was a self-portrait, but not a traditional one. It showed a woman whose face was split in 2. On one side, she was bathed in warm golden light, a paintbrush in her hand, a soft, hopeful smile on her face. On the other side, her face was in shadow, her expression lost and sad, and in the background, a man's silhouette was walking away from her. He stared at it, his heart clenching. She had painted this while they were still together. She had felt him pulling away long before he had said the words. She had seen the end coming, and she had put her heartbreak onto the canvas. And he had been so wrapped up in himself, so consumed by his own selfish ambitions, that he had never even noticed. He carefully wrapped the painting in a blanket. It was the only thing he would take with him that truly mattered. Life in the basement of Apex Realty continued its monotonous rhythm. Leo had become a fixture, as much a part of the dreary landscape as the filing cabinets and the buzzing fluorescent lights. People had stopped staring. He was old news. He did his work diligently, mechanically. Scan. Catalog. File. Repeat. The work was mindless, which was a blessing. It gave him too much time to think. His thoughts were a constant, looping reel of his failures. He saw Ilara's face on the day he told her to leave, the shock, the hurt, the quiet dignity with which she had absorbed the blow. He heard Sloane's derisive laughter. He felt the cold emptiness of the house. Regret was no longer just an emotion, it was his entire state of being. It was the air he breathed, the food he ate, the silence that filled his tiny apartment. He started to see Ilara differently in his memories. He remembered her intelligence, which he had mistaken for idle daydreaming. The silly ideas she would give him for work, he now realized they were brilliant, strategic insights. He remembered her strength, which he had mistaken for passivity. She had held the weight of an entire corporate empire on her shoulders while pretending to be a simple artist, all for him. All because she loved him. The scale of her sacrifice, and the scale of his betrayal, was so immense it sometimes made him feel physically ill. One afternoon, a young intern was sent down to the archives to find an old zoning file. He was nervous, fumbling with the request slip. Leo, without looking up from his work, gave him the precise file number and cabinet location from memory. The intern was shocked. "Wow, thanks. How did you know that?" "I've been down here a while," Leo said, his voice flat. He had memorized the entire archive system. It was the only thing his mind could focus on, a complex but logical world where everything had its place. It was a pathetic substitute for the ambition that once drove him, but it was something. He rarely saw Ilara. She was a presence on a different plane of existence. He'd see her name on company-wide memos, her picture in business journals. She was thriving. Under her leadership, Apex Realty was not only more profitable, but it was also gaining a reputation for ethical practices and community involvement. She was realizing her father's vision. She was everything he had told her she wasn't, a doer, a success, a force to be reckoned with. And she was doing it all without him. The desire to speak to her, to confess the depth of his foolishness, grew into an obsession. But what would he say? "Sorry I destroyed our marriage and tried to build a life with another woman in your house? Sorry I was a blind, arrogant fool?" The words felt laughably inadequate. He decided to write a letter. Writing felt safer. It allowed him to organize the chaos in his head without having to face the cold judgment in her eyes. For weeks, he wrote and rewrote it, filling a wastebasket with crumpled-up drafts. The first attempts were full of excuses, attempts to explain why he did what he did. They sounded weak and self-serving. He threw them away. He realized the letter wasn't for her to understand him. It was for him to tell the unvarnished truth. He finally wrote the final version on a single sheet of simple white paper. There were no excuses. There were no pleas for forgiveness. It was just a confession. He started by admitting he didn't know who she was, not really. He admitted that her quiet strength had intimidated his fragile ego. He wrote about his jealousy of her talent, her inner peace, and how he had tried to reduce her to something small so he could feel big. He admitted that he had taken her love for granted, that he had mistaken her kindness for weakness. He apologized for his cruelty, for his blindness, and for the public humiliation he had caused her. He ended the letter with a simple, stark paragraph. "I don't expect you to reply. I don't expect or deserve your forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see you. I see what I had, and what I threw away. I hope you are happy. You deserve all the happiness in the world." He signed it simply, Leo. Now, the problem was how to get it to her. He couldn't just leave it on her desk. He couldn't mail it. It felt too impersonal. He had to give it to her himself. The thought terrified him. It meant facing her. It meant seeing her reaction. But he knew it was the last necessary step in his penance. He folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and for the first time in months, he waited for the end of his shift with a sense of purpose, however terrifying it might be. When you've been deeply hurt, is it better to seek a form of justice, or is true freedom found in simply walking away and letting karma handle the rest? Leo waited for 3 days for the right moment, the letter a heavy weight in his jacket pocket. He knew Alara often worked late, long after the bustling energy of the office had died down. He imagined her in the CEO's office, her father's office, a place he had only ever seen from the outside, a symbol of a world he had desperately wanted but never truly understood. His plan was simple and terrifying: wait until the building was nearly empty, go upstairs, and ask her assistant if he could have just 2 minutes of her time. On the third night, a fierce thunderstorm rolled into the city. Rain lashed against the windows of the basement, and the wind howled around the building's foundation. It felt fitting, as if the world outside matched the turmoil in his soul. He took a deep breath, his heart hammering against his ribs, and rode the service elevator up to the top floor. The executive wing was silent and dimly lit. The plush carpet absorbed the sound of his footsteps. It was a world away from his dusty basement. Alara's assistant was gone for the day, her desk neat and empty. The large wooden doors to the CEO's office were slightly ajar, and a sliver of warm light spilled out into the hallway. He could hear the soft sound of music playing from within, a classical piano piece he recognized. One she used to play while she painted. His courage faltered. He could just slide the letter under the door and run. It would be easier, safer. But he knew that was the coward's way out, the same path he had taken his whole life. He had to do this face to face. He raised his hand and knocked softly on the heavy door. The music stopped. A moment of silence passed that felt like an eternity. "Come in," a voice said. It was her voice. Calm, steady. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was magnificent, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the storm-swept city. Bookshelves lined one wall, and on another hung a massive, breathtaking painting of a forest after a fire, with tiny green shoots pushing up through the blackened earth. It was one of hers. In the center of the room was a large mahogany desk, and behind it sat Alara. She looked up, and her composure broke for just a fraction of a second. Her eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of an old, forgotten emotion crossing her face before being replaced by a neutral, guarded mask. She wasn't wearing a power suit, but a simple cashmere sweater. With her hair down and the soft lighting in the room, she looked more like the Alara he remembered, and it made his heart ache even more. "Leo," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "What are you doing here? You know employees aren't supposed to be on this floor without an appointment." "I know. I'm sorry," he said, his own voice sounding rough. He stood awkwardly just inside the doorway, feeling like a trespasser. "I'll be quick. I just needed to give you this." He held out the letter. His hand was trembling. She stared at the envelope, her expression unreadable. She didn't move to take it. "What is it?" "It's an apology," he stammered. "It's everything I should have said a long time ago. Everything I was too arrogant and too stupid to see." She was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on him. He could see the conflict in her eyes. The CEO, the woman who had been betrayed, the wife he had once loved, all warring with each other. Finally, she stood up and walked around the desk, stopping a few feet away from him. The scent of lavender and rain filled the space between them. She looked not at the letter, but directly into his eyes, searching for something. "An apology," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "After everything? After you threw me out of my own home? After you stood on my porch with her and smiled as I drove away? What kind of apology could possibly be enough for that?" Each question was a fresh wound. "There isn't one," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Nothing is enough. I know that. This letter, it's not for you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. It's for me to finally tell the truth. To you. To myself. She held his gaze, and he didn't look away. For the first time, he didn't hide. He let her see all of his shame, all of his regret. He let her see the broken man he had become. After what felt like a lifetime, she slowly reached out and took the envelope from his hand. Her fingers brushed against his, and the brief contact felt like an electric shock. She didn't open it. She just held it, her eyes still locked on his. "Do you know what the hardest part was, Leo?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the humiliation. The hardest part was realizing that the man I had spent 8 years loving didn't actually exist. He was a story I told myself. I saw your potential, your goodness, and I loved that version of you so much that I refused to see the person you were actually becoming." A tear traced a path down her cheek, and she didn't wipe it away. "My father warned me that money could blind a man. I was so afraid of that, I never considered that a man's own insecurity could be even more blinding." The truth of her words hit him harder than any punishment. She wasn't just a victim of his betrayal, she was a victim of her own hope, her own love. He had not only broken her heart, he had broken her faith in her own judgment. "I'm so sorry, Alara," he whispered, the words feeling utterly hollow. She gave a small, sad nod. "You should go, Leo." He turned to leave, feeling a strange mix of relief and despair. He had done it. He had faced her. As he reached the door, she spoke again. "The painting," she said, her voice stopping him in his tracks. He turned back. She was looking at the large canvas on the wall, the one of the forest fire. "That's what this felt like," she said, her voice gaining a little of its strength back. "Like my whole world burned to the ground. For a long time, all I could see were the ashes. But then, you start to notice the new growth. The little things pushing through. You realize that sometimes, a fire is the only thing that can clear the way for something new to live." He looked from the painting to her, and he finally understood. Her revenge was never about destroying him. It was about her own survival. It was about clearing away the dead wood of their relationship so she could grow again. The revelation was not that she was the owner of the company. The true revelation was that she was a survivor, and he was just part of the fire she had to walk through. He nodded, unable to speak, and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. He left her there in her father's office, with his pathetic apology in her hand and a whole new forest growing around her. In the days that followed his visit to Alara's office, Leo expected something to change. A summons to HR, his immediate termination, a scathing email, anything. But there was nothing. Silence. The lack of response was a form of torture in itself. Did she read the letter? Did she throw it away? Did it mean anything to her at all? He continued his work in the basement, the uncertainty gnawing at him. About a week later, he was called upstairs. Not to HR, but to the office of Arthur Vance. Leo's heart pounded as he walked the now familiar path of shame to the top floor. He entered the office to find Arthur sitting behind his desk, Alara's letter resting on the blotter in front of him. "Alara shared this with me," Arthur said, his tone neutral. He tapped the letter with his finger. "She wanted my opinion." Leo's stomach plummeted. And I told her it was the confession of a fool," Arthur said bluntly. "A man who threw away a winning lottery ticket because he was too busy trying to pickpocket strangers for spare change." The old lawyer's eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "But I also told her it sounded honest. Painfully so." Arthur leaned back in his chair, studying Leo. "Alara is a remarkable woman. More like her father than she knows. David Sterling believed in second chances. But he also believed that a second chance had to be earned, not just given." He pushed a new document across the desk. It wasn't an employment contract. It was a project proposal. Leo looked at it, confused. The title read, The Apex Community Housing Initiative. Elara is launching a new philanthropic division of the company, Arthur explained. The goal is to build affordable, high-quality housing for low-income families. To create the kind of communities she spoke about in the meeting. It's not a profit-driven venture. It's about giving back. Leo looked up, still not understanding. What does this have to do with me? Elara thinks that the man who wrote this letter, Arthur said, gesturing to the apology, the man who finally sees the value in things other than commission checks and status, might be useful. She has authorized me to offer you a position. A junior project coordinator for this new initiative. Leo was stunned into silence. It wasn't a trick. It was a lifeline. A chance to do something meaningful. But it came with a steep price. The position is a lateral move from your current role in the archives, Arthur continued, his voice firm. The salary is the same. There are no commissions. No bonuses. You will have no direct contact with Elara. You will report to the division director. You will be a small cog in a very large machine, doing good work for little glory. This isn't a path back to your old life, Leo. That life is gone forever. This is an opportunity to build a new one, from the ground up, on a foundation of humility. The choice was laid bare before him. He could continue to rot in the basement, consumed by regret, or he could accept this penance. This chance to atone, not with words, but with actions. Why? Leo asked, his voice hoarse. After everything I did, why would she offer me this? Arthur sighed, his expression softening for the first time. Because she believes that the only way for you to truly understand what you destroyed is to help build something that matters. Or perhaps she simply wants you to see, every single day, the world she is building without you. I'm not sure which it is. Maybe it's both. He paused. The choice is yours, Leo. Do you want to spend the rest of your life buried in the past, or do you want to try and build a better future, even if it's not the one you dreamed of? Leo looked at the project proposal. He thought of the painting of the forest fire, clearing the way for something new to live. This was it. A tiny, green shoot pushing up through the ashes of his life. I'll do it, he said, his voice firm for the first time in months. I accept. The consequences for Sloane had been swift and brutal. Fired from Apex, she was effectively blacklisted in the city's competitive real estate market. Word of the scandal had spread like wildfire. No top firm wanted to hire an agent known for having an affair with a coworker, especially when that coworker's wife turned out to be the owner of the company. Her reputation was in tatters. The last Leo heard, she had moved to a different state, trying to start over, her dreams of being a queen reduced to a cautionary tale whispered at office happy hours. She had hitched her wagon to what she thought was a star, and it had dragged her down into the mud with him. For Leo, the consequence was not a single dramatic event, but a long, slow, daily reckoning. He took the job. He moved into his small apartment. His life became a quiet routine of work, solitude, and reflection. He poured himself into the community housing initiative, working long hours, learning about zoning laws for low-income housing, meeting with contractors who use sustainable materials, and talking to the families who would one day live in the homes he was helping to build. It was hard, thankless work. He was no longer the star. He was just a guy with a spreadsheet and a hard hat. But for the first time in years, when he went home at night, the exhaustion he felt was clean. It was the ache of a day well spent, of contributing to something bigger than his own ego. He never saw Elara. She remained a distant, powerful figure at the top of the corporate ladder. But he saw her work. He saw her vision taking shape in the foundations of the buildings they were creating. He was, as Arthur had said, a small part of the world she was building without him. And in a strange, painful yet cleansing way, it was enough. He was finally learning the lesson she had tried to teach him all along, that true value isn't in what you own or how high you climb, but in what you build and who you lift up along the way. His punishment was not his fall from grace, but the daily humbling task of earning his way back to being a good man. A year passed. The first project of the Apex Community Housing Initiative was complete, a beautiful, modest complex of townhomes with a shared garden and a playground, named Sterling Meadows. Leo stood on the edge of the property during the dedication ceremony, just another face in the crowd of employees and community members. He watched as Alara took the stage, not as a ruthless CEO, but as a gracious community leader. She looked happy, genuinely happy. There was a lightness to her that he hadn't seen since the earliest days of their marriage. She spoke about her father's dream and her own hope that these houses would become homes filled with love and security. Her eyes scanned the crowd, and for a fleeting moment, they passed over Leo. There was no anger in her gaze, no pity. There was just a calm acceptance. A polite, distant acknowledgement, like one might give a former neighbor. They were two different people now, living in two different worlds that had, for a brief, catastrophic time, collided. After the ceremony, as people mingled and toured the new homes, Leo stayed back, watching from a distance. He had no right to be a part of the celebration. His contribution was his penance, done in the background. "It's good work you're doing, Leo." Leo turned, startled. It was Arthur Vance. The old lawyer was holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Leo. "You've been quiet this past year," Arthur observed. "Kept your head down. Done the work." "It's good work," Leo agreed, echoing Arthur's words. "It matters." "It does," Arthur said. They stood in silence for a moment, watching a group of children run squealing onto the new playground. "She's selling the house, you know. The one on Oakwood Lane." Leo's heart gave a painful throb. The kingdom, he thought, was his. "Oh. She said it has too many memories," Arthur continued, "both good and bad. She wants a completely fresh start. She bought a new place. A loft downtown. Lots of natural light for her painting." "That's good," Leo said, and he was surprised to find that he meant it. "She deserves that." The thought of her painting in a new sunlit space, free from the ghosts of their past, brought him a strange sense of peace. Her happiness no longer felt like a judgment on his failure. It just was. And he was glad for her. "She also read your letter," Arthur said quietly. Leo looked at him, surprised. "She did." "Many times," Arthur confirmed. "She told me that for a long time, she hated you. Then she pitied you. But after reading it, and after watching you this past year, she's found her way to something else." "What's that?" Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Forgiveness," Arthur said simply. "Not the kind where everything goes back to the way it was. That's impossible. It's the kind of forgiveness that means she's letting go of the anger. She's letting go of the hold you had on her, good and bad. She's setting herself free. And in a way, she's setting you free too." The word settled over Leo, not with a jolt, but with a quiet, profound sense of release. Forgiveness. It wasn't a reward he had earned, but a gift she had given herself, and the ripples of it were washing over him, cleansing the last of his self-hatred. Arthur clapped him on the shoulder. "Keep doing the work, son. It's your path. Make it a good one." The old lawyer walked away, leaving Leo alone with his coffee and his thoughts. Leo looked back at the townhomes, at the families exploring their new lives. He thought of the self-portrait Alara had painted, the one now hanging in his small apartment. The woman split in two. He realized that he had been split too. The ambitious, arrogant man who craved status, and the younger, simpler man who had been happy just to be loved. He had let the wrong half win. He finished his coffee and turned to leave, feeling a sense of closure he never thought possible. His future wasn't bright and shiny like the one he had planned with Sloane. It was quiet, simple, and solitary. But it was real. And it was his. He had lost everything he thought he wanted, only to find a sliver of something he actually needed, a purpose. As he walked towards his car, he heard his name called. "Leo." He turned. It was Elara. She was walking towards him, a small hesitant smile on her face. His breath caught in his throat. Elara. Congratulations. This place, it's incredible. Thank you, she said. You were a part of it. I saw the work you put in. Thank you for that. It was the least I could do, he said, looking at the ground, unable to meet her eyes for too long. Look at me, Leo, she said gently. He did. Her eyes were clear and bright. I forgive you. He just nodded, a lump forming in his throat. I'm not the woman you married anymore, she continued, and you're not the man I left. We're strangers now, but I hope your life is a good one. I hope you find peace. You too, Elara, he managed to say. You too. She gave him one last final smile, not of love but of peace, and then turned and walked away, disappearing into the happy crowd. Leo watched her go, a single tear rolling down his cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or regret, but of gratitude. He had been given a second chance, not to reclaim his old life, but to build a new one worthy of the man she once thought he could be. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow over the new homes. For Leo, it felt like a sunrise. The first sunrise of the rest of his life. Do you believe true forgiveness requires forgetting what happened? Or is it about accepting the past, honoring the lessons it taught you, and choosing to move forward without bitterness, even if the relationship can never be repaired?